I was browsing Tinder, kind of exhausted, and frankly, feeling pretty lonely. That was only last year, when the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic finally started to ease. I had tried Tinder before and had met some interesting people. Nothing that was really out of the ordinary, but reasonable, normal things. The last time I used the app, and I can assure you, the last time I will use it, I met a girl called Haley. She had that kind of friendly appearance, which made me want to talk to her right away. She seemed pretty, but more than that, I felt like I could finally connect with someone. The conversation flowed well, and we soon decided that we would meet in person. But honestly, things started to get awkward faster than I expected. As you may have heard, there are always those scary stories about meeting strangers on the internet. After a few beers, I ended up giving in to her drink, even though I was suspicious. But the feeling of unease only increased. It was as if I was becoming more and more paranoid, as if it were an irrational impulse. I had this weird feeling that something wasn't right, as if she was trying to get me drunk on purpose. What scared me more was the thought that maybe she had slipped something into the drink while I was out of sight. As the night went on, I was starting to feel different. I was trying to ignore it, but then things started to get more intense. I was lost in the feeling of being totally out of my mind. But it wasn't just the alcohol. I really did feel stranger and stranger until I started to pass out without knowing what was going on. When I woke up, the world was distorted. I was on the bathroom floor, my body aching, completely confused. Something terrible had happened, and I knew it. But it was difficult to understand the gravity of the situation. The worst thing was when I realized the wounds on my body. Deep cuts, stab marks, panic set in. The bathroom was filthy. Blood covered the floor and walls, and I could hardly believe my eyes. I tried to call the police, but my cell phone was gone. She had stolen everything, my phone, my TVs, even valuable things in my house. You always think these things won't happen to you, right? But that's exactly how I felt. I thought we were just going to have dinner or watch a movie, but she insistently wanted to come to my house. And I, a little uncomfortable, made up an excuse about not being able to meet at my house. The truth was that my house was a mess, and I really wanted to go out, but she insisted, and strangely, I gave in. She was clear about it, saying that there was no point in us meeting anywhere else. I know I should have taken that as a red flag, but I didn't pay it any attention. She was attractive and I was lonely, and deep down, I knew she was using that to her advantage. Anyway, she came. And what happened next was, well, something quite bizarre. She arrived, and I immediately noticed something strange. She looked a little different from her Tinder photos. I didn't want to be rude, so I let it pass. After all, I'm not very good looking, so I decided not to make any comments. We started chatting, and soon she asked if I had anything to drink. I said I had some Jameson, but she seemed to prefer something stronger. When I came back from the bathroom, I noticed that she was sitting on the sofa with a baby in her hands. Strange. And what I saw on the coffee table made me question it even more. A glass with a prepared drink, which she put there for me. The house was devastated, completely destroyed. It looked like an abandoned place, but I knew someone had done it. I looked in the mirror and couldn't process what was happening, but one thing was clear. I wasn't alone. She wasn't alone. There was something much darker behind this woman. When I finally managed to call the police, I was able to tell them what had happened. But when I logged into my old Tinder, her profile no longer existed. The police informed me that it had been some kind of extremely rare drug, probably a tranquilizer with a powerful effect. All I know is that I made the worst choice of my life by trusting her. And now, my life would never be the same. I've moved to a new place, and now I've installed cameras and an alarm system, because I've learned the hard way how much you need to be prepared for the worst. The lesson is clear. You never know who you're dealing with on the internet, and I was very naive.
I'm a 21-year-old girl, and when I think back to the events of 3 years ago, I still feel a weight on my chest. At the time, I was 18, just out of high school. It was a quiet August afternoon with pleasant weather. My life that summer was going almost normally, but reality was about to change drastically. For as long as I can remember, I had lived in isolation with my father. He was always very protective in a way that bordered on excessive control. I had no friends, I couldn't leave the house without his permission, and my only function seemed to be to help with the housework, or worse, to be treated as a kind of maid. It got to the point where he removed the door to my room, leaving me completely exposed to his constant surveillance. But about a month ago, he gave me my first cell phone. The reason was clear. He thought he could control even what I did in my spare time. However, one night, after a drinking binge, he forgot to pick up my cell phone, and that would become the beginning of everything. That's when I started using Tinder, a way of meeting people and ultimately making new connections. Even with years of total isolation, the desire to meet someone who understood my situation was great. I found a guy we'll call Alex. He was 28 and seemed to understand my need to escape from everything around me. We started talking, and the friendship developed faster than I had imagined. I had to be careful. My father wouldn't tolerate me using that cell phone at will, so every night I deleted any messages he wouldn't approve of. But Alex seemed trustworthy. He suggested that I move in with him, an escape that seemed appealing and frightening at the same time. He assured me that as an adult, I no longer had to obey my father. I was hesitant, still afraid of his reaction, so I asked for more time to think. But when he showed up, as agreed, I sent him a message saying I was leaving. I planned a specific spot to meet him, a secluded area of the road so that my father wouldn't notice anything. Alex let me know he was there, so I climbed out of the window and started walking to the agreed point. However, something was strange. His car wasn't visible, and the silence around us was unusual. It was then that I started to hear shouts and laughter coming from where I thought he was. At first, I thought maybe he was on the phone, but as I got closer, the words became clearer. He was talking to himself, or seemed to be. That's when my intuition kicked in, and a cold sensation ran down my spine. I ran back to the house and, on an impulse, hid in the nearby woods. Minutes later, my cell phone vibrated. It was a message from him. "Where are you?" I ignored it. The messages and calls went on until I finally decided to reply, trying to come up with an excuse to cancel everything. But he didn't believe me. That's when he began to show his true character. He insulted me in a cruel way, saying that no one would ever love me and that I was nothing but a burden. And in the end, he gave me a warning. "I know where you live. Don't forget it. I'll see you soon." Fear gripped me. The last thing I heard was the sound of a car accelerating, and then he disappeared from my life for the time being. I blocked him out in every possible way and ran to tell my grandmother, who knew about the abuse I was suffering at home, but had no idea of its intensity. She got me out of that situation, and I finally found a path to freedom. Since then, my life has changed. I'm in a healthy relationship and working towards having my own space. The pain and fear are still there, but I'm stronger now. I tried to report Alex, but the police couldn't do anything without concrete evidence. I know he may still be hurting other people, but at least I escaped. and now I'm finally at peace.
When I started university, I thought that trying out some dating apps, such as Tinder and Bumble, could be an interesting way to meet new people and maybe break up the monotony of everyday life. That's how I came across a girl called Anna. Her face looked vaguely familiar, and I soon discovered that we went to the same school, but had never spoken. I exchanged a few messages with her, and, surprisingly quickly, she suggested we meet up that same evening. I thought it was strange, but the idea of an unpredictable evening excited me. She gave me the address and insisted that I bring something to smoke. I've never been one to use anything, but I wanted to impress her. So I bought a small packet from a friend. The meeting was scheduled for after 11. At that moment, I should have been more careful and let someone know where I was. But the stranger's excitement clouded my judgment. Driving there, I began to notice that the neighborhood was becoming more and more decayed. The houses were old and poorly lit, and the uncomfortable feeling of being in the wrong place began to grow inside me. When I finally stopped in front of the address indicated, the shiver down my spine intensified. The house looked abandoned, with only a dim light flickering upstairs. For a moment, I thought about leaving, but before I could reverse the car, a notification popped up on my cell phone screen. It was Anna, asking where I was and insisting that I get in. I reluctantly gave in. What I found when I walked through that door was worse than any nightmare. The interior was in a deplorable state, with fallen furniture, dirt, and a strong musty smell in the air. The only soundtrack was loud music coming from upstairs. I went upstairs hesitantly, calling for Anna. There was no reply. When I reached the upper corridor, I saw only 2 doors. One of them was ajar, with a flickering light coming from inside. Before I could take another step, the music stopped abruptly, and an oppressive silence gripped the house. Suddenly, a violent bang echoed from the dark room, followed by distorted laughter. My body froze. A terrible feeling of imminent danger gripped me. I spun on my heels to go down the stairs, but on the last step, a man with long hair and black clothes appeared blocking my way. His face was painted as if it were part of some macabre ritual. "You're early," said a female voice behind me. I turned around and saw a girl standing at the bedroom door. It wasn't Anna. The false identity was clear now. I had been tricked, lured into an ambush. "This isn't funny," I tried to argue, feeling my heart race. They just laughed. The man on the lower floor slowly began to climb the steps, while the girl closed the door behind her. I had to act fast. On impulse, I ran into the next bathroom and locked the door. There was a loud knock from outside, turning the handle violently. My mind was spinning in despair. Then I saw the only way out, a small window over the sink. Without thinking, I leaned on it and began to force my way through. The glass cut my arm, but I managed to squeeze through until I fell onto the sloping roof. Hearing the shouts and hurried footsteps inside the house, I crawled to the side and spotted an old trampoline in the yard. With no alternative, I threw myself onto it and rolled along the ground as I landed. I ran with all my might to my car and slammed the door, putting it in gear and getting out of there as quickly as possible. My fingers were shaking as I picked up my cell phone and dialed the police. Hours later, a policeman knocked on my door to get more details. They discovered that the house was indeed abandoned and that the group was using the place to lure victims from dating apps. 2 bodies had been found in the basement, and the suspects belonged to a macabre sect that promoted human sacrifice rituals. The police managed to capture some of those involved, but the others escaped. To this day, I avoid all dating apps. That night almost cost me my life.